Response to the Ask Andy segment has been overwhelming on our Tennis Channel social media platforms. You can submit a question by using the hashtag AskAndy. Here's one of his answers about the possible tour merger.
If the ATP and the WTA merger were to go through, what would the name of the new tour be? The real question is, would you choose in a name that already has some brand equity like an ATP or WTA, or would you want to go an entirely new route and rebrand the entire thing? People smarter than I would probably be in the room making that decision. But between ATP and WTA, one seems to fit everyone and one seems to be very gender specific.
All right, and with that, we welcome live and in color Andy Roddick for his regular Wednesday visit. Let me just follow up on that answer which you gave, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Everybody likes, I think, most people like the concept of an ATP-WTA merger. In your opinion, is it feasible, and do you think it will actually happen?
I hope it's feasible. But my point the entire time, whether it's the player relief fund, which is a good idea in theory, or a merger, which is a great idea in theory, is does it work? Do both parties win from a business perspective if it happens? And how do you bring long-standing contracts, whether it's a WTA Tour Finals contract or the equivalent on the ATP side? How do you marry those? Do you each bring your own assets in, and then after a certain expiration date, they kind of blend together? So it's just not as easy as like a hashtag, we're together, and then all of a sudden it works. There's a lot of particulars that need to be vetted a little bit. I think in theory it would be great from a TV packaging perspective, from a lowering cost on site perspective. If you can run events over a 10-day period as opposed to a 17-day period, including qualities, I think that all works. There's a lot of benefit to it, but there's going to need to be a lot of thought behind it. And like simple questions, who is the CEO if it happens? Is someone going to negotiate a deal and then, by virtue of that, lose a job? So that's just one example. There's a lot of things that need to be sorted out, but I hope it happens.
We've always said in our sport it'd be great if there was one person, one entity making decisions. We have the ITF, we have the ATP, we have the WTA. So my question is, if you were that one person, what would you start with? Would it be the calendar? Would it be how tournaments are played out, the length of tournaments? Just curious on what you think would be the biggest thing to change.
I would look at untapped revenue streams. Whether it's at the slams, we're providing our ranking system, we're providing the players, the general infrastructure leading in. We're plugging the U.S. Open the whole way, or Wimbledon the whole way. My first thing is there's no cut of merchandise at the U.S. Open where they're selling $27 hot dogs. None of that goes back into a player fund, and I don't even need to be prize money. It could be a retirement fund for players. It could be a benefits package for tour employees. Whatever that is, I would look at what isn't being monetized that could be monetized. For all parties involved. The schedule, I've always been a fan of, they say, the top players, don't need the paychecks late in the year. I would probably front load the fall schedule so that the most important tournaments were after the U.S. Open, make a bunch of 250s afterwards. So then if you're playing for paychecks, if you need a points run at the end of the year, you can still opt to do that, but the top players can take a rest if they'd like to. So I just think little things where you're shifting, but like you said, Lindsay, there's so many different entities that are all in it for their own interest as opposed to the best interest of the sport as a whole. So there are some infrastructure issues to the tours and to the tennis business in general that have been challenging.
Yeah, look, I think if you do merge the ATP and the WTA, you're only about halfway where you need to be, right? Those aren't the playoff events in tennis, right? The Grand Slams, those are the events where we bring in the outside viewers who are not the hardcore viewers. But it is crystal clear, if you just look at the most successful events on tour, both the slams we know and then the non-tour events, they're the ones where we're playing combined events. And one of the things that Andy, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet or Andrea Gaudinzi. He was of my time on tour. I know him well. I saw him in Sydney. One of his big visions is to try and get more big combined events like the Cincinnatis, the Indian Wells, more 10-day or events like that. So we have more tentpoles. So I'm not sure that this merger solves any problems necessarily. So it may solve some, Because if you're not really going out with Wimbledon and saying you're not getting Wimbledon TV rights unless you take the TV rights of Atlanta and the other events, the smaller events, you don't really have the leverage, do you?
No, I mean, and that's a great point too, because when you get a Super Bowl, you have to take some other stuff that's not as as beneficial as a Super Bowl. You get sold that also. So I think you're right on. Just from a negotiating perspective, I think there's been whether it's divisiveness amongst players, whether they want more clay tournaments, more hardcore tournaments, less schedule, more schedule. There always seems to be a moment where you're playing different entities against each other. And I think the Slam's position with the WTA and the ATP, that's possible. I think if it is a unified front, you actually have a lot more leverage points coming in as one entity working with the Slams than you do if they're breaking off the WTA. Well, they accepted this, but ATP, you haven't, so you're the only one out on your own island. So I do think from a negotiating perspective, just as far as being one entity and being able to actually bully a little bit more, it probably makes sense. But you're right. It's been a long standing bet against unity, whether it's court surface, schedule, mergers, separate tours, whatever it may be.
Okay, changing gears here a little bit. We've been going over the last couple months of shows, real or fake, and our dedicated staff at Tennis Channel came up with this video. And Andy, I need you to tell us, is this real or is this fake?
Oh, yeah.
You remember this?
So, yeah, Lindsay, there are so many fake parts about this video that I can't even stand it. This was a Powerade commercial, so this is as real as Michael Vick throwing a football out of the stadium. This is as real as I think it was Kelly Slater surfing during a typhoon. So the fakest part about this is that that's not even a clay court. That is actually the hard court at Delray Beach, which we always see the tour event played on. And they actually just kind of they painted it orange, and then a makeup artist, there was half of a ball, and the makeup artist actually just made it look like it stuck in the clay court around it. So not one of this part, not one of it. This is like as fake as like a Housewives episode. I'm telling you, this is very, very fake.
So Andy, when they brought this treatment for this commercial to you, these Powerade geniuses, you said, yes, let's definitely do it on a red clay court because that's what people want to see. Andy Roddick on red clay. Was that part of it?
Well, I just came off of a hot run in Houston. I think it was like 2002. Went all the way to Titletown there, Jim. So, I don't appreciate your condescending nature about the red clay French Open champion.
It'd be like me having a commercial on grass. It just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, well, kind of, but it's like this humility that's not really humility because you still made a Grand Slam final at Wimbledon, if I'm not mistaken.